Welcome to the Commercial Edge podcast with me, Chris Webber. Come and enjoy a virtual coffee while I share my experience and ideas that could help you overcome difficult people at work. I share my thinking and insights so that you can find new ways to overcome challenges and gain a commercial edge and unleash the power of people. Today we're going to be talking about people who argue their point. I've been in a few meetings recently where it's got a little bit heated and clients have got frustrated and arguments have ensued. So I want to talk about how to deal with argumentative people. So I'm going to talk about some examples, some famous examples, explore a bit about their vision. So what do they think they're doing? What's their approach? What are they doing? I want to touch about how we feel, how it feels when someone is being argumentative. And then I'm going to talk about the impact on trust, on team trust. Obviously, some advice on how to deal with the complainers. So what do we think about when we come across argumentative people? Well, I think words that come to mind are negativity, are mood hoover, which is a phrase I heard a few years ago, and somebody who finds problems with everything. It doesn't matter what's going on. They just seem to have an other opinion, another attitude, some sort of negativity towards it. And they can be frustrating. They can be hard to manage. They can be hard to deal with. So let's discuss some famous people who are perhaps known for being argumentative. The first person that comes to mind to me when I think of argumentative people is Nigel Farage. I'm absolutely no fan of him, but he's undoubtedly influenced change. He was pretty much unknown as a politician. He had a niche belief which was against the European Union, against the membership of the European Union and what they stood for. And over time, his belief became more and more mainstream and led to significant change, Brexit, UK leaving the European Union. And for many years before anybody considered the idea of a referendum, Nigel Farage was appearing on TV shows as an almost unknown politician, as a campaigner. He was there because he made good TV. He was there because he brought a point of view, a perspective. He was challenging. He was difficult, he was different, and he was argumentative. And he put the typical politicians on the back foot, the ones who just accepted the status quo. His beliefs were that he rejected the European project and he questioned every single facet of what being in the EU meant. And I disagree with his politics, but there's no doubt that he did raise some valid points and some valid questions about the EU and the direction it was taking and how it was structured. And those things, his counterintuitiveness, his counter arguments were what gradually unpicked support for the EU across the population and led to such a groundswell of support for a referendum and for the result of the referendum. There's also a famous historical personality that I want to touch on, a guy called John Roebling. John Roebling was responsible for the design and the engineering of the Brooklyn Bridge when it was built back in 1869. His approach, his idea of woven steel cables to create a suspension bridge was absolutely new and groundbreaking. And it was counter to what a lot of people believed was possible at the time. His argumentative style, his attention to details, his pushiness for getting the investment and to get it started led to the project being completed to his vision years after his death. The bridge was started in 1869 and he died within a few months of the construction being started. But such was his style, such was his passion, his argumentativeness and his position that despite people's disagreements, it held true. Nobody changed his plans. And I think that says a lot about argumentative people and argumentative style, because what these guys have in common is that they challenge the status quo. They take something which is expected, which is understood, which is well believed, and they flip it around and they challenge it, they question it, they pick at it, they find something different. They're prepared to do so openly. You know, they will sit against politicians, they will sit against experts, and they will bring their challenges to the table. They are confident in their beliefs, and they will back them with the arguments, with the courage of their arguments. And actually, both of these guys had a very clear vision and a mission. Building the Brooklyn Bridge in a way that he believed was going to be novel and important, or exiting the European Union. Very, very clear objectives. And that meant that their arguments were structured around a clear goal. And that's important for when we start to think about people at work and their negativity, their argumentativeness. Their vision for what they think they're doing is that they believe they are someone who knows the right way to do something. They're really passionate that they have the answer. And as such, they campaign for what they believe is something important. They're passionate about chasing something which matters. They also believe that they can see what others cannot, that they have some sort of insight into the future or into the way things can be done that the rest of us just can't spot. And of course, they have the courage of their convictions. They stand by it. They challenge others. They discuss their points. They will bring it on the TV, in the newspapers, online, on podcasts, and they will argue their point. If we're on the other end of that, if we're trying to deal with someone argumentative, and let's start to flip it around to deal with people at work and difficult colleagues or difficult customers that we're trying to manage, it can feel like we're always getting something wrong. It can feel that it doesn't matter what it is that we do, it's never good enough. And that's partly the style of what these guys are doing, is they're setting perfection, setting expectations and standards that can almost never be met. And if you look at the arguments around Brexit, despite leaving the EU, it's still not enough for many of the people who are passionate about it. They wanted more. They wanted certain things to be agreed. And so even having left the EU, what the UK has done has not been enough to satisfy people who were passionate about the Brexit programme. And that's a good example of how argumentative people can make us feel that it doesn't matter what we do, it's always going to be wrong. We can start to feel like we're always in the way. They can be annoying. You know, these guys, they're just, constantly the same story. And as a team in meetings dealing with colleagues, it can be seen that these guys are creating needless tension. If you're a manager, you're trying to understand your team, you're trying to connect with your team, you're trying to build trust. And there's this guy who's just picking, pushing and nudging. It can be really frustrating. So let's explore a little bit about the difference between someone who's passionate and argumentative on a mission and somebody at work who's annoying, because their status of a mission matters. Are people who you see as negative and argumentative on a mission? Are they focused on excellence on a particular topic and that's what they argue for and they're passionate about? Or are the people who are frustrating you simply picking on everything? Is it always something that's not good enough? Because I think that the difference between a positive argumentative person, a person who's fulfilling their vision of someone who knows the right way to do something, who's campaigning for something important, is simply that they have that mission. They have that clear focus. People who we find annoying are the ones who sit in every meeting and they find a problem with everything. We value people who are consistent. We value people who we can expect them to pick up on certain things. So if we know someone has a pet project, a pet program, pet way of thinking, way of working, and they're going to pick on that, they're going to chase it, they're going to be after it, they're going to argue for perfection, we kind of expect that. People who we find negative, who question everything, challenge everything, nothing's good enough, they always want to play devil's advocate in the meetings, they're frustrating and they're not helpful. And despite what they think, they might argue that they're being devil's advocate. They might argue that they're bringing different ideas to the table. But when they do it too much, when it's too often, then it becomes difficult. It becomes a pain. They become negativity. And the truth is that what we're trying to get is team trust. As managers, as leaders, or even dealing with customers where you are trying to work together on strategic programs, trust is very, very central to that. And we want to have a positive relationship with the team that we're in. And what that means is we all have an individual relationship with the team. So how that team behaves, how it reacts to certain situations, how it makes us feel is our relationship with the team. And therefore, we can or need to be careful about how people are behaving. The performance of the group matters. If things are going great, hitting our targets, doing well, then it's easy to let things go. People are being negative, people are being challenging. Well, we might listen to them. We might feel that they are helping us to improve. When things aren't going well, the same people can get annoying because that's seen as destroying morale, destroying results, maybe even trying to shift accountability away from themselves. And so our relationship on performance really matters. And I think that's an important question to ask, that what's our context? Are people annoying us because things are not going great and therefore that's the heart of what's driving us crazy? Or are they annoying us despite the fact that things are going well? It's an important point to understand because we really respect people who are driving performance, but we get frustrated by people who are blockers. So if we're trying to fix things, we're trying to make things better, then we want people on our side to agree, to get things going, to move things forward, to take steps in the right direction. If they're being negative, if they're argumentative, if they're picking at things, that's frustrating because we feel like they're not helping us move forward. And I've got some clients I've been working with for whom this is a very relevant discussion because they need to make some progress quickly to turn things around, just to get on the right foot. And negativity within the group is affecting their ability to even run positive meetings and to come away from meetings with clear action plans because somebody's in there derailing the topics, derailing the conversation. And I can't help wondering whether negativity is connected to status somehow. That if I'm negative, if I'm challenging, then what I'm actually arguing is that I'm important. Am I trying to prove that I'm smarter than someone, that I'm more confident, that I'm more experienced than others, that I have a better point of view, and therefore my status is higher? And perhaps in a situation where you've got this trust, maybe one of the elements that's missing here is someone's feeling of value to the team, that they're not feeling valued, and therefore they feel like they need to be a blocker just to get noticed, just to be seen as someone important. And I think that's very relevant when you start thinking about how to deal with things. Because as leaders, as managers, and you start thinking about this as well in the relationship with customers, there are two key roles to play. The first is to optimize individual performance and get the best from each person, get the best out of the people that we're working with. And that means listening to them, understanding their ways of working, their ways of communicating, their strengths, allowing their strengths to float to the surface and giving them the space to perform. Now, that might mean someone who's got a vision slightly different, or a vision of perfection, or an attention to detail, and comes across as being difficult. You need to create space for that. But the second role you have as a manager, leader, or person managing a customer is the group dynamic. It's not as easy as just saying, well, I can satisfy each individual. If those individuals are starting to harm the group dynamic, then it's important you can step in. And so if someone is choosing the wrong moment to step in and be argumentative, if they are damaging morale in the rest of the team because of the way that they're behaving, because of what they're saying, because of the tone that they're taking, then that's not acceptable. And as a leader, you have a right to step in and curtail people's behavior that is damaging performance for the rest of the group. So yes, you give people space and trust, but when that space and trust and performance starts to damage others around the table, then you start to look at, what are we doing here? Is this the right thing to do? Argumentative people intend well. They really want to feel that they're adding details, that they're thinking about preparation, or that they're seeing something that other people are not seeing. That's something they're bringing. And maybe they have a valid point. Maybe they are bringing something like that. The question is about when. And the problem is that if you reject their ideas, if you just shut them down in meetings, if you tell them now's not the moment, they might feel that you're disrespecting them and that you're not really paying them the attention that they deserve. And if status is a big motive for them, removing that status by shutting them down will become an emotional challenge for them. They will struggle to deal with that. And we feel at times that that's what I must do. That's where my power is. But the truth is that's going to create an emotional reaction from them because it's so important. And when you get emotional reactions, they are hard to predict and they're hard to manage. They're going to work hard to prove themselves right. It's much better to find other ways to close them down, to protect their status, to respect their status, but to avoid this power struggle and the confrontation. So I think you need to be clear on a couple of factors. First of all, be clear about what their area of expertise is. So if you know that, if they're clear that you know that when you want their help and experience, ask, bring them in at the right moment. They'll like it. But that also means to be clear when you don't need it, when you don't want it. If they know what their expertise is and that they can bring it in at the right moment, you also have the right to close that down when it's not the right time. Have a conversation with them. Explain to them that while you appreciate the comments, they need to be at the right time and on the right topic. And that actually their behavior is becoming disruptive and difficult and affecting the performance of the group and the way things are working. It's a difficult conversation to have, but you're giving them the space, the ownership, the pride that they need, the respect that they need. You're just managing where the edges are, and it's okay to draw boundaries. And that means that when you do want their help, make sure you engage them. They're looking for opportunities to feel involved, to feel important. Don't give them an excuse to feel rejected. Be proactive on that. The second thing to talk about then is when suggestions are welcome. So there's one thing to say, hey, yeah, I respect your expertise and I value your expertise. There's also the right moment to bring in your expertise. Think about a forum. Is it the right forum? Public meetings, when information's being shared, you're being told what's happening. Arguments waste time. They waste energy. They create tension and friction, which is unnecessary. It can also be very disrespectful in the way that they deal it. So get people involved when things are being developed. At that time, there's an opportunity to contribute. When they're being rolled out, that's not the right moment. And that also means that if they're not involved because decisions have been made at a higher level, then that's something they're just going to have to accept. That's a boundary. You know, leadership have made a decision, leadership are rolling out a strategy or doing an approach. We weren't consulted. It is what it is. And whilst it's frustrating, then it is what it is. Then you can take that conversation to a smaller group. Give them the space to listen to what they're saying, but in a small group. Have conversations where they're more intimate and you can better pay attention without the confrontation, without the power struggles. Because whether we like it or not, around the table, there is always a power dynamic, and people are often asking questions to look important, look smart, build their status. And those things are not as important if they're having a one-to-one conversation. It might then be appropriate to say, hey, you know what? You make some good points. I'm going to raise this with leadership, or allow them the space to go and have a conversation with leadership. If it's been a told, this is the thing that we're doing. But you also need to make it clear that if the decision's been made, it's time to move on. Some interesting thoughts, I hope, on dealing with argumentative people, and just tying back to Nigel Farage and listening to some advice by Alistair Campbell at the moment, who's talking about how to deal with people like him. And they say that you need to get into the detail with him. You need to expand where he is weak. He has arguments, but he doesn't have answers. He has problems, but no solutions. And I think this is an interesting lesson. If people are just being argumentative because they want to cause trouble, to be difficult, to build status, which I think reflects a Nigel Farage scenario, then they don't have the answers. Somebody who does have answers, perhaps someone more like John Roebling, well, he knew what he wanted. He had the answer. It wasn't just, oh, we should do things in a different way. It was, this is the way we should do it. And I think that contrasts the difference. I can't imagine that if Nigel Farage wasn't in the news every day, he'd have the same influence and the same power. John Roebling died and his legacy lived on, and the Brooklyn Bridge still stands as a testament to his vision, to his difficulty, to his argumentativeness. And I think that's the difference. Somebody who has got answers rather than just questions. Thanks for listening to the Commercial Edge podcast. I'll be back soon with another episode. Join me then when we delve into more difficult conversations. See you next time.